Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'd like just to make a couple of comments in response to what I've heard, and then I'll make a motion, or the committee can proceed with its deliberation. I think there appears to be a misunderstanding, as Mr. Rager was suggesting, that this bill proposes to ban transfers. It does not. It does not propose to ban transfers. It simply proposes to provide what I would term a very minor inconvenience of going through a background check before being able to engage in that transfer, a public safety-related background check. And I'm not sure where the addition of the $25 fee is in connection with that. The proposal refuses to either mandate a fee or not from a private licensed firearm dealer, but it certainly allows for that fee to be charged if the firearm dealer wishes to do so. We have control over whether local governments can do the fee, but we're not proposing to mandate anything with regard to a fee for the firearms dealers themselves. Mr. Rager said that we're proposing to give exemptions for family members. Therefore, we're not making this universal. Well, it seemed to me making exemptions for family members was something that the NRA and gun owners wanted us to do. And now that it's included in the bill, even broader than was in the original bill, we're being castigated for it as somehow no longer being universal. So I don't think they'd appreciate it, nor would Minnesotans, if we closed that loophole. So I'm not going to propose to do that. The point is not to track the transfer of firearms. The point is to do a background check on the transferees. That's the point, is to keep the guns out of the hands of people that are ineligible to possess them. Now, Professor Olson raised the issues of attorney's fees, and it sounds like he's opposed also to using, to including the confinement language, involuntary or not, in that. And I will indicate I'm open to working on those provisions. I'm open to discussing those provisions. I may be persuaded by Professor Olson's comments on those. Mr. Nash did make a comment that a 72-hour loan was not enough. Well, I can always delete that provision of the bill, and then current statute at 12 hours would remain in effect. I thought I was trying to accommodate the interests of gun owners by extending that to 72 hours, but I guess we can see how the process goes. And I would respectfully submit to Mr. Gross that there is no Second Amendment issue here. I would say, first of all, the Second Amendment is not absolute. The Second Amendment does not guarantee absolutely everyone the right to have unfettered access to firearms. We already know the Second Amendment does not guarantee the right of people convicted of felony crimes of violence to possess firearms. There isn't any dispute over the constitutional law on that question. Similarly, with those who have been committed for having severe, significant psychiatric disorders, mental illnesses, all we are seeking to do is to provide a system by which that information is better communicated to the existing background checks, whereby we are actually able to have meaningful, yes, discretion on the parts of the chief law enforcement officers in the state, the police chiefs and the sheriffs, to not only learn about but evaluate the significance of those kind of mental health issues and backgrounds, and yes, contacts with the police departments, in determining whether someone is just that cranky teenager who once had contact with the police, or whether the crankiness was a symptom of some ongoing issues that maybe the neighbors would prefer that cranky teenager or now young adult not have a .45 Magnum in his possession when he's walking down the street. I don't think that we can legislate for every particular fact situation, but I think we can legislate some standards and have some trust in our chief law enforcement officers to apply those standards in individual circumstances with the due process rights of appeal. So, members, we're going to be faced with a choice here. We can close the gap in background checks. It's a little bit like building a dam that's 60% across the river. 60% of all private sales now of firearms are covered by background checks because they go through licensed firearm dealers. The other 40% aren't. If you build a dam only partway across the river, the water's going to find a way around the dam to go down the river. You've got to not only shore up the dam that you have, which is a lot of what Senator Ortman's bill does, but also build the dam the rest of the way across the river so that you, in fact, are capturing all of those ineligible persons in the background checks. Another analogy that I've heard before was if people are boarding an airplane and they only had 60% of the passengers go through the security screening at the airport. The other 40% could just walk right on through and get on the plane. Would you be comfortable getting on the plane knowing that's the security situation? I submit the strong majority of Minnesotans would not be comfortable with the analogous situation in background checks for purchases of guns. The fact is, gun violence is an epidemic, members. There are 1,000 deaths a month in this nation from guns, and they are mostly not the horrific mass shootings that we read about in the papers and see on TV. They are mostly in ones and twos with pistols on the streets of our communities. We have the opportunity here to make a meaningful and very low burden background check to try to stop those who are ineligible from possessing firearms from getting them. And I ask for your support for these bills in their entirety. That said, Madam Chair, I will ask the committee if you'd like to have some further discussion on it, and then with the time as appropriate, I will move the A6 amendment as amended.
Oh, thank you, Senator Latz. And let's try to get through this quickly if we can, please. Any questions from members? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, early in the evening, you established the rules of play for the people assembled here. But I've never once heard a chairman of a committee say that the people of our state couldn't even express an opinion by nodding their head. I've never even heard that. You know, after all, these are American citizens, and I suppose we're talking about the Second Amendment. I hope we aren't talking about the First Amendment. I've never heard that in 25 years of being in office. Now, there are times when people get a little riled up, and we want to tone down the rhetoric and keep the discussion to a reasonable effort, and that we really do not appreciate loud protest. But the nodding of a head, I can't believe I heard that this morning, or this afternoon.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Yes, Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, I was actually passing along a request from one of your Senate Republican colleagues on this committee. So perhaps you ought to direct your concerns to your colleagues that were distracted by it.
Madam Chair.
For what it's worth. Maybe I should have screened that out.
Madam Chair.
Maybe an appropriate background
Senator
check would have been
Madam Chair, whether it's
but I take your comments to heart, Senator Limmer.
whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, nobody should deny our people a right to express themselves. And we shouldn't be so sensitive that if someone's sitting across the room and they disagree with something I say, I better pay heed to that. And I think we're beginning to, maybe the session is getting a little long and we're beginning to bump into each other a little bit. But I think we all should have a reason to pause and remember who we're working for. The other comment I'd like to say is that after looking over your bill and knowing where the votes are in the Senate as well as in the other body, I think we have a bill that's not going to pass. And so all the effort that we've been putting into this, all of the headlines, all of the attention to the gun issue, I think, will be for naught due to your bill. I think you've created too heavy of a bill to be carried by, and I'm usually pretty good on head counts. I don't think it can pass out of the Senate. And I would even doubt even more somewhere else in this building. So I don't know what we're trying to accomplish here if we aren't trying to work on something that everyone can agree with.
Senator Ortman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, I consider this to be a hostile takeover of my bill. I don't support what you're doing with my work and the work of others that helped me to learn about these issues, especially about the NICS index. I also think it's hostile for you to refuse to take a vote on my bill, Senate File 1359, and put it on the agenda as only discussion, because I believe it would pass this committee, and I believe it would have strong support in the Minnesota Senate. But more importantly, Senator Latz, I believe this effort is hostile to law-abiding gun owners in the state of Minnesota. It's also hostile to their personal property rights. But more importantly yet, it's hostile to the principles of the Second Amendment, which creates a right of gun ownership, not a privilege. It imposes on Minnesotans' rights. So, under your bill, if I understand it, you're going to try and regulate those private transactions between private individuals over their backyard fence. You're going to try and extend the time for our law enforcement to decide when a person has a right to a gun or not through the permitting process. You're going to extend that up to 30 days. You're going to create discretion where there is none now under Minnesota law. When we passed the concealed carry law, we all agreed that the law enforcement should have a shall issue requirement so that there wasn't discretion, so that the sheriffs and the chiefs weren't making arbitrary decisions, that it wasn't one way with one applicant and another with another, and that their personal relationships wouldn't get in the way, that they would be required under Minnesota law to fulfill the right when someone does apply for a permit. And instead, now you're going to require them, not even may, require them to look at all prior contacts with individuals who apply for a permit and consider them in a permit application. And when you do that, you've asked them to consider contacts that have never been through the due process requirement. They're not even arrests. They're just contacts. They're completely unreliable in determining the basis for denying someone their constitutional rights. And then even worse, you impose on folks, individuals with mental illness, Madam Chair. No due process. So we may have returning veterans who won't want to get help, who won't want to go to a 72-hour hold. They might fear that they might not be able to then exercise their Second Amendment rights. You've changed many of the legal standards. It seems to me, Senator Latz, that this is a very selfish act here, because I think that this committee would pass Senate File 1359. I think that it would. I think the Senate would. We should be targeting gun crime and not law-abiding citizens. We should crack down on straw purchases. We should improve the state and federal background check system. We should improve the reporting for court-determined mental health disqualifications and create a process for restoration of rights. We should strengthen the penalties on felons and repeat criminal offenders. We could do all that without imposing on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding residents. We don't need new restrictions on gun purchases or ownership. We don't need any kind of impact on law-abiding citizens. We don't need universal background checks. We don't need to repeal or roll back the shall issue law of the concealed carry. And Madam Chair, Senator Latz, members, I wish that you would put Senate File 1359 back on the agenda for tomorrow. This committee could still pass a bill that Minnesotans could believe in and support.
I think,
Madam Chair?
members, I think we're ready to vote.
Madam Chair?
Okay, Senator Latz, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah. because Senator Ortman has taken it upon herself to accuse me of being hostile on a couple of points, including on refusing to allow us to vote on her bill. Madam Chair, as an act of professional courtesy, I agreed to put on this agenda a bill that was just introduced this week by Senator Ortman. An extraordinary accommodation, because most bills that are introduced at this point in session when the policy deadline is Friday don't have a snowball's chance, and you know where, of getting on a committee's agenda. And Senator Ortman specifically requested that I put this bill on the agenda, and I indicated to her that I would do so with the express opportunity for Senator Ortman to discuss the bill and to identify the provisions about her bill that she's most concerned about. And for that professional courtesy, she's saying, I'm being hostile by not putting it to a vote. Senator Ortman, next time I will know not to put your bills on the agenda at all when it comes in this late in the session, because now I am being castigated for it. So, and I'm not even going to address your accusation of this being a selfish act. But I will say that Senator Ortman is a lawyer. She knows what due process is. And this bill is replete with due process. The Constitution and our statutes are replete with due process, where in certain circumstances a property right is taken away from an individual, and post-deprivation there is judicial process to have the constitutionally mandated review of that circumstance. And I can start listing all the places in statute where that occurs, but there's no point in doing that. The fact is, this is not about due process. This is very simply a question of whether or not law-abiding citizens ought to have the minor inconvenience of having their background checked before they are able to purchase a product which, used for its intended purpose, will kill people and other things if it's used in that manner. Seems to me that is a very minor regulatory addition to our fabric of laws to protect the public safety.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Roll call, Mr.
So, Madam Chair,
Roll call has been requested.
Madam Chair, I move the adoption of the A6 amendment as amended.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
oh.
I wish you invoke Rule 1210, which would put record the vote in the Senate Journal.
Okay,
3 hands is required.
all right, 3 hands. I see 3 hands. Okay, 3 hands I see. We'll put it in the journal. We are ready to vote in the A6 amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye.
There was a roll call,
on
ma'am.
that too. Okay, sorry, missed that. Take a roll call.
Senator Latz,
Yes.
Senator Hall,
No.
Senator Ortman,
No?
Senator Cohen,
Yes.
Senator Limmer,
No.
Senator Goodwin,
Yes.
Senator Sharon,
Yes.
Senator Dietzick,
Yes. There being 5-3, the amendment is passed. Senator Latz, to the bill.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 458, as amended, be recommended to pass and be referred to the Senate floor.
Okay, Senator Latz's amendment, all in
A
favor?
roll call, Madam Chair.
Roll call has been requested.
And and invoke the 1210 ruling again, Madam Chair.
Okay, if I see 3 hands? 3 hands, okay, we'll do that. Now, we'll have a roll call.
Senator Latz,
Yes.
Senator Hall,
No.
Senator Ortman,
No?
Senator Cohen,
Yes.
Senator Limmer,
No.
Senator Goodwin,
Yes.
Senator Sharon,
Yes.
Senator Dietzick.
Okay, Senate File 458 as amended, it's recommended to, it's passed and is recommended to go to the Senate floor. It will move to the Senate floor.